तो आज हम लोग अपनी नई सीरीज स्टार्ट करने जा रहे हैं। सीरीज का नाम रहेगा इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस इन कौटिल्याज व्यू। मल्टीपल फॉरेन पॉलिसीज, चाहे वो एक्ट ईस्ट पॉलिसी हो, चाहे वो व्यू ईस्ट पॉलिसी हो, सारी चीजें, यूएस के साथ रिलेशन, चाइनीज रिलेशन, नेबरिंग कंट्रीज के साथ रिलेशन, इसे वॉर ड्रिवन एनवायरनमेंट में इंडिया का स्टैंड क्या होना चाहिए, ये सारी चीजें हम लोग डिस्कस करेंगे बेस्ड ऑन कौटिल्य और चाणक्य आइडियोलॉजी। अब देखिए, इंडिया का जो रिलेशनशिप स्टेटस है वो आज का तो है नहीं। लाइक फॉरेन कंट्रीज के साथ वी आर हैविंग ट्रेड सिंस एंशिएंट टाइम्स। ग्रीक्स आते थे हमारे यहाँ, चाइनीज, हुन्स एंड ऑल, ईरानीज, अरब, सब आते थे एंड दे वर मेनली ट्रेडर्स। बट जब ये कॉलोनियलिज्म और इंपीरियलिज्म का दौर आया, या फिर जब वो वॉर ड्रिवन लोग आके यहाँ पे सेटल होने लगे, तब से लेकर के इट इज इम्पोर्टेंट किसी भी नेशन के लिए ये जानना कि वर्ल्ड में क्या हो रहा है, क्योंकि वर्ल्ड इंटरेस्ट nowadays can influence countries' interest. ठीक है, अब इसमें मल्टीपल थ्योरीज भी आई। मल्टीपल थ्योरीज मतलब कि कुछ लोग कहते हैं नो, लाइक स्ट्रॉन्ग कंट्री शुड कैप्चर द वीक कंट्री, ऐसी थ्योरी, रियलिज्म की थ्योरी आई और बहुत सारी थ्योरीज आई। लोगों ने अपने अपने विचार दिए सामने, कैसे किसी भी राष्ट्र को मोडस ऑपरेंडी, उसका जो वर्क कल्चर है वो कैसे मेंटेन करना चाहिए, उसके रिलेशंस कैसे मेंटेन होना चाहिए, डिप्लोमेटिक टॉक्स क्या होती है, क्या डिप्लोमेटिक टॉक्स में इंडिविजुअल का रोल होता है या फिर कंट्री का रोल होता है। देन लास्टली विजडम। विजडम का सिंपल सा मतलब होता है, अगर लॉजिकलिटी भी कहते हैं, तार्किकता। शक्ति, उसे कहते हैं विजडम। आप लोगों ने सुना होगा जब शंकराचार्य को बुलाया गया, शंकराचार्य हिंदू धर्म का प्रचार कर रहे थे, उनको बुलाया गया कि आप, उस समय बौद्धिस्ट धर्म जो था वो अपने पीक पे था, तो उनको बुलाया गया कि शास्त्रार्थ करिए। शास्त्रार्थ जब पुराने जमाने में होता था, उसका मतलब ये होता था कि सामने वाले ने आपसे जो पूछा, आप उसका रिप्लाई क्या देते हैं, उसमें आप अपना विजडम कैसे शो करते हैं, उसमें अपनी नॉलेज कैसे शो करते हैं, जो अकाट्य हो। समझे बात को? बात इतनी सी है कि जो आप बात करते हैं, जो आप चर्चा करते हैं, अगर उसका काट्य है तो विजडम की कमी है, और अगर जो आप बात करते हैं अगर वो अकाट्य है तो फिर मतलब आप एक वाइसफुल पर्सन है, ऐसा माना जाता है, ऐसा कहा जाता है, बाकी ऐसा कुछ बड़ी बात नहीं है। तो सोर्सेज ऑफ इंडिया वर्ल्ड व्यू, सबसे पहले इंडिया है क्या, तो महाभारत में जो संजय नरेटर है वो रिकॉल करते हैं फॉर द किंग ऑफ धृतराज विजन ऑफ एंटायर कॉस्मोस की पूरी धरती कैसी है। तो पूरी धरती में उन्होंने बताया इट्स अ वास्ट सर्कल ऑफ 7 कंसेंट्रिक ओशन सेपरेटिंग 6 region or varshas. Each has its own mountain and river system. At the center lies Jambudweep. कैसे डिस्क्राइब किया गया है सेपरेट टेक्स्ट में, एज अ 4-petaled lotus floating in an ocean with own Varsha, Bharat, defined by the southern petal. It has Himalayas and the mountain system, mighty rivers as do the other Varsas, and seas surrounding it triangular shape. This is a landscape that is mythical yet hallowed, and also recognizably physical. It is template ingrained in the collective Indian consciousness that continues to shape our view of the world around us. as it has through the centuries, irrespective of rise and fall of empires. The vision has endured in subconscious prevailing over political, social, cultural particularities that makes India such a diverse country. अच्छा, एक और बात, जैसे कि हम लोग पॉलिटिकल मैप पढ़ते हैं, ज्योग्राफी का पॉलिटिकल मैप पढ़ते हैं, आपको क्या लगता है कोई भी कंट्री का डिवीजन जो होता है ऑन व्हाट क्राइटेरियाज? कुछ लोग कहते हैं जैसे कि हमारी एथनिसिटी अलग है इसलिए हमारा जो होगा रिलीजन अलग होना चाहिए, हमारा कल्चर अलग है, हमारी लैंग्वेज लिंग्विस्टिक प्रॉपर्टीज के बेसिस पे होना चाहिए. So there can be multiple source of reasons because of which a nation can get formed. And nation का मतलब होता है commonality of culture, religion, ethos and all. तो उस कम्युनिटी के लोग जिस पर्टिकुलर एरिया में रहते हैं उसे कहते हैं नेशन. अब जब नेशन को आप रियलिज्म से कनेक्ट करेंगे तो रियलिज्म तो कहता है कि भाई आप बड़े स्टेट को छोटे स्टेट्स को अपने अंदर ले लेना चाहिए. तो रियलिज्म अगर ये छोटे स्टेट की अलग एथनिसिटी है, छोटे स्टेट की अलग एथनिसिटी है, सबको मिला दिया जाएगा तो ये तो मल्टीकल्चरल नेशन हो जाएगा जैसे इंडिया है. ऑब्वियस सी बात है कि पॉलिटिकल एरिया इंक्रीज होगा. तो पॉलिटिकल एरिया इंक्रीज होने के साथ साथ क्या होता है, रिसोर्स एक्सेस मिलते हैं. और रिसोर्स एक्सेस होने से कोई भी कंट्री की ग्रोथ डिटरमाइन होती है. ये अब रिसोर्स कैन बी ऑफ मल्टीपल टाइप. इट कैन बी लाइक मिनरल्स, मेटल्स, इट कैन बी योर इंटेलेक्चुअल ब्रेन्स और समथिंग. तो रिसोर्स कैप्चर. जब ब्रिटिशर्स छोड़ के गए तो एक बात कही उन्होंने, लाइक छोड़ के नहीं गए, उसी समय थे 1888 में एक आदमी हुए ब्रिटिश कॉलोनियल एडमिनिस्ट्रेटर जॉन स्ट्रैचे. So there are many in West and some in India who were considered India as an artificial construct. आर्टिफिशियल कंस्ट्रक्ट जैसे मैंने अभी बात कही, क्योंकि नेशन की डेफिनेशन तो कॉमनैलिटी पे डिपेंड करती है, बट इंडिया इज मल्टीपल एथनिक, मल्टीपल पीपल, मल्टीपल लिंग्विस्टिक लैंग्वेजेस एंड ऑल. सो उन्होंने कहा कि इंडिया एज अ नेशन इज एन आर्टिफिशियल कंस्ट्रक्ट. द फर्स्ट एंड मोस्ट important thing to learn about India is that there is no India and never was an India. ये कह रहे हैं. बट स्टिल अगर हम लोग हिस्ट्री में देखेंगे जाके तो देयर आर सर्टेन सेंट्रलाइज्ड एम्पायर लाइक मौर्यंस covering much of the subcontinent at least century before Qin united only the part of known China. The distribution pillar of Ashoka pillar and the rock-cut traces much of the same geography as India under the British control rule. तो भाई साहब आप ब्रिटिशर्स को कि भाई साहब अकेले आदमी नहीं हो जिसने इंडिया को यूनाइटेड किया, चाहे वो मौर्य हो, चाहे वो गुप्ता डायनेस्टी हो, चाहे वो अकबर का राज्य हो, तो इन सब लोगों ने भी तो इंडिया को लाइक यूनाइट किया. सो इंडिया वाज यूनाइटेड. And the thing is, that's why we have quasi-federalism in our concept. So India has developed itself on based of the people. Like what kind of a people are there in India? India has developed itself for the benefit of the people. Now, Alexander Cunningham, the British archaeologist who served in colonial India, cites Greek historian Strabo on how the country beyond Indus was described to Alexander of Macedon by those well acquainted. So, इन्होंने इंडिया को डिस्क्राइब कैसे किया? These learned men describe the land known as India as rhomboid and unequal quadrilateral in shape, with Indus to the west, mountains to the north, sea on the east and south. इन्होंने तो कंप्लीट इंडिया को ऐसे ही डिस्क्राइब किया, अभी जैसे कि आप मैप देख सकते हो. The close agreement of these dimensions given by Alexander's informant with the actual size of the country is very remarkable. So shows that Indians, even at that early date in the history, had a very accurate knowledge of the form and extent of the native land. Cite this historical and yes mythological background to dispel the notion that Indians have never shared identity beyond a certain cultural and religious affinity, or this affinity never found in political expression rooted in the discovery. अब देखिए, Mahabharata and Ramayana also unfolded across what may be called a sacred geography. The invading of Mughals, then Britishers, assumed that the mantle of rule over the land people that for millennia had a universal acknowledged identity of India. पहले इंडिया में राज्यों के बीच में इतना ज्यादा बॉर्डर्स, अब जैसे कि देख लीजिए आप, अगर कोई स्टेट है जैसे कि यूपी बिहार को अलग कर दिया जाए, पर बॉर्डर उनके इतने ज्यादा आपस में कनेक्टेड है कि इट विल बी वेरी टफ टू सेपरेट देम. So being on a social land or being on a political land, physical land in such kind of a climatic environment, it becomes very harsh to separate the land. So like आप physical geography देखोगे ना तो आपको लगेगा यार ये एक ही country है. But because of the because of the cultural differences, people say that no, there is a multiple India. Physical geography will tell that India, like the nation, can have a bigger sources. It can go beyond like that. जब हम लोग फिजिकल ज्योग्राफी के बेसिस पे काम करते थे तो we were having like सब कॉन्टिनेंट रवर्स, हम लोग पूरे सब कॉन्टिनेंट पे रूल करते थे. So the invading of Mughals mentals rule of India. Mughal emperor like Akbar, Jahangir commissioned Persian language, Persian translation of Mahabharata, Ramayana. These translations contained commentaries that sought the legitimacy of Mughal rule. Positioned in long line of empires and king dating back to remote antiquity, rulers of the geographic spaces also called India. Akbar's conquest was compared to Yudhishthira and Lord Ram Ashwamedh sacrifices as in the indispensable ritual for a Chakravartin and a universal ruler. इंडिया में अच्छी बात यह है कि जो हमारे यहाँ आया वो हमारा होके रह गया. People transformed their identities as per the religious consciousness or as per the cultural consciousness of India. ये चीज आपको बहुत कम स्टेट्स में देखने को मिलती है, बहुत कम कंट्रीज में देखने को मिलती है. So we have a inclusive identity. इसमें बहुत अच्छी बात जो है, जब स्वामी विवेकानंद पहुंचे शिकागो में अपना फिलॉसफी के बारे में बताने, तो हिंदू कल्चर के बारे में बता रहे थे, तो उन्होंने बताया, तो उन्होंने बोला कि जैसे कि सब यहाँ लोग सोचते हैं कि सबके धर्म अलग हैं तो बीच में टकराव होना चाहिए, ऐसा नहीं है. उन्होंने बताया कि धर्म का मतलब, हिंदू धर्म, सनातन धर्म का मतलब वो है कि आपका धर्म अलग हो सकता है, आप एक क्षेत्र में आपकी नदी अलग है, लेकिन सारी नदियां आखिर में जाके समंदर से मिलती है. सनातन धर्म वो समंदर है जिसमें सारे धर्मों की नदियां आके मिलती हैं, क्योंकि धर्म क्या है, वो पाथ है. पाथ हमको कहाँ लेके जाएगा, एंड पॉइंट वही है. यूनिवर्सल इंक्लूसिज्म की बात है, इंक्लूसिव बनाने की बात की गई थी. ऑल्सो वी आर फेमिलियर विद कौटिल्य शास्त्रा ऑफ द 4th century BC. अच्छा, ये अर्थशास्त्र खाली इकोनॉमिक्स की बात नहीं करता, ये पूरे साइंस ऑफ गवर्नेंस की बात करता है। आज लेटर इन संस्कृत नीति शास्त्र, नीति शारा भी है कमंडा की। हाँ, ये भी बात करता है, मोर स्पेसिफिकली रेफर्स टू सेवरल ओल्डर वर्क्स ऑथर्स has also different theories propounded by them. Interstate relations figured in these works are essential part of our state. There are other textbooks such as Bhagavata Puran, which are in nature of discourses of ancient sages and scholars focused on the nature and roles and responsibility of kingship. Narad Muni, who was no less than a celestial diplomat, ranging between heaven and earth, sometimes acting as a conciliator, sometimes as a wise counselor, but often as an instigator of conflict and dissent. Narad Puran is a massive repository of his exploits. The management of interstate relations also figures in some of these texts. The Arthashastra of Kautilya is undoubtedly the most important Indian treatise on statecraft. Kautilya is also known as Chanakya, may have served as a counselor to Chandragupta Maurya, the founder of Mauryan Empire. He declared in his work that the welfare of the state depends on the active foreign policy. What is of interest to the geopolitical strategist, the foreign policy practitioners, is the extraordinary detailed section on foreign policy in Arthashastra, which provide flexible and dynamic theoretical framework for the conduct of interstate relations. Now, this is the settings. In the modern terms, the multi-state, multipolar landscape of contending state, the perspective through which foreign policies options are evaluated is of which Jushu, one desirous of conquest. But the principle on which options are based can apply to any state. The basic template, as per the progressive and more complex interrelationship explored, is an elementary mandala. मंडल क्या है? The conqueror shall think of a circle of states as a wheel, himself as the hub, and his allies drawn to him by the spokes though separated by intervening territories as it rim. ठीक है, तो ये कहना चाहता है कि किंग को सोचना चाहिए कि एक व्हील है, स्पोक्स के थ्रू कंट्रीज जुड़ी हुई है, एंड किंग इज अ सेंटर. Now, the intervening territory may contain hostile, neutral, strong, or weak, even vassal state. Their precise pattern in the territory defining Vijisu foreign policy strategy. When setting out to expand his empire, the Vijishu must ensure that he possesses the seven constituent of his state power, which have a surprising contemporary resonance and are echoed in the modern concept of comprehensive national power. क्या क्या क्वालिटीज होनी चाहिए एक फॉरेन डिप्लोमेट के अंदर? सबसे पहले पॉलिटिकल लीडरशिप, स्वामिन, गुड गवर्नेंस थ्रू काउंसलर्स, अमात्यास, territory and people knowledge, Janpada and Rashtra, economic knowledge, fortifications, military power and allies, clear cut understanding. तो किसी भी कंट्री में क्या क्या पावर की, पॉलिटिकल लीडरशिप उसकी कैसी है, गवर्नेंस कैसी है, गवर्नेंस के लिए जो उन्होंने काउंसलर्स हायर करें, जो मतलब कि पॉलिसी मेकर्स के काउंसलर्स हैं, वो कितने जुडिशियस है, वो कितने इंटेलेक्चुअल है, वो कितने प्रैक्टिकल है, टेरिटरी और पीपल कैसे हैं, इकोनॉमिक कैसे फंक्शन करती है, फोर्टिफिकेशन कैसा है, सिक्योरिटी कैसी है, एलाइज फ्रेंड्स कौन है. Taking the approach rooted in the prudence, Kautilya then goes on to formulate the foreign policies options for an active and expanding state in a multi-state settings when confronted with a hostile state विग्रह. जब किसी एक स्टेट का दूसरे स्टेट से हॉस्टिलिटी बढ़ती है तो उसमें हम लोग क्या क्या कर सकते हैं. पहला है संधि, सीकिंग पीस थ्रू ट्रीटी. दूसरा फिर आसना, स्टेइंग न्यूट्रल, या ना मार्चिंग टू एन एक्सपेडिशन. शमशरया, seeking protection from a strong state, pursuing dual policy of war which one state and peace with one another. द्वाधिभावा. क्या अभी हम लोग ये सारे टर्म्स को ही एक मॉडर्न वर्जन में नहीं सुन रहे? चाहे फिर वो आसना नॉन अलाइन मूवमेंट हो, चाहे फिर वो डिप्लोमेटिक टॉक्स हो, चाहे फिर वो डी हाइफनेशन की पॉलिसी, ये सारी चीजें हैं. Based on these categories of state, hostile or friendly, for example, any and action which can exist or take place in several permutations and combinations, Kautilya built his international relation theory along with the form of mandala or organizing principle. One must be careful not to become mechanistic in applying this template to contemporary situation, but there is no doubt that these methods of managing a multipolar, multi-states scenario in Arthashastra must we teach. अब कौटिल्य कैसे बात करते हैं? कौटिल्यन tradition of statecraft was acknowledged and elaborated on by several later masters से भी. वो लिख के चले गए, बाकी लोगों ने भी उसको एज अ समझाने की कोशिश की. उन्होंने अपने ट्रीटाइज लिखी उसके ऊपर, ये सब किया गया. For those in the world of diplomacy, Niti Sara of Kamandaki is also truly remarkable text. So it builds on the work of Kautilya. It builds on the work of Kautilya and earlier scholars, and also use mandala as a conceptual framework of examining interstate relations. At the most basic level is the state, which has a set of immediate neighbors, a set of neighbors. This is elementary mandala. The states that are immediate neighbors have an inherent tendency to be hostile towards the protagonist state in the question. The immediate neighbor own neighbors in turn are likely to be potential allies to the protagonist state, since they are subject to the same dynamic with respect to their own intermediate neighbors. These categories are not immutable, can change dependency of circumstances. सिंपल सी बात है, जैसे कि इंडिया है. अब इंडिया एज एन स्टेट, पाकिस्तान डायरेक्ट नेबरिंग स्टेट, अफगानिस्तान सेकेंड. सो बोथ हैव हॉस्टाइलिटीज. इंडिया की भी पाकिस्तान के साथ हॉस्टाइलिटी, अफगानिस्तान के साथ भी. सो देयर विल बी अ लिंक बिटवीन, पॉजिटिव कनेक्ट बिटवीन इंडिया एंड अफगानिस्तान. ये वही कह रहे हैं कि दुश्मन का दुश्मन दोस्त होता है करके. The instruments to be used in handling the situation involving neighboring states are same in Arthashastra. Sama, conciliation or alliance. Dan, placating or winning over the gift. Dand, punishing through the use of force. Bhed, showing dissensions. Niti Sara clearly lays out that Danda, the use of coercive power or war, is the last resort. when all other options have failed. The tradition also attaches higher value to wise counsels, mantra shakti, than to the power of king based on his treasury, his army, prabhava, or his own energetic temperament, utasha shakti. It enjoins the ruler to make a clear determination between what is attainable and what is not through a cold and intelligent deliberations, that is through the application of mantra shakti. Kamandaki devotes a separate chapter to the role of diplomats and diplomatists titled as Doot Rachana. This is an ancient Indian version of British diplomat Ernest Satav, a guide to diplomatic practices. Now, Satav book, regarded as the classic, was our Bible when they have joined Indian Foreign Service in 1970s. Now, Kamandaki lists three categories of royal ambassadors. First is empowered by a king to take the decisions while on missions. Something like a plenipotentiary nowadays. Second is having a limited power, perhaps like ranking diplomat of today. Now, in key responsibility, representational responsibility. Third has a role of envoy, who is only a missionary with a task of delivering and receiving the messages on behalf of king. The Niti Sharas goes into a considerable details about the qualities of royal ambassadors and the manner in which he should conduct himself while on the mission. The royal ambassador should be expert debater with a good memory, eloquence, well versed in the military science as well as the Shastras and sufficiently experienced in ambassadorial functions. He should patiently bear with abusive words of adversary and himself avoid sensual impulses and anger as well as sleeping in the company of others. He should be by all means maintain the secrecy of his feeling, the plan of actions. On the other hand, he should ascertain the feelings of others. So these are the wise words of the advice which our diplomats today would do well to follow even if the predecessors often did not. India worldview is worth examining with the framework of mandala as described in the old treatise of Indian statecraft. Studying the Jambudvip mandala from our ancient text, one is struck by the fact that it does not ascribe centrality and superiority of Bharatvarsh, which is the only amongst the lotus petal that makes up the universe. Each concentric circus in the mandala that radiates outward is superior to the preceding one. This is the reverse of Chinese worldview, which sees Han core as the most advanced, which increasing larger sizes symbolizing the more barbaric and less civilized. India will never have a middle kingdom complex. It accepts the world in which there are Dvipas, island, with their own characteristics and values. The Jambudvip Mandala has more direct bearing on how India looks at a Indian subcontinent in modern construct. Indian subcontinent and eastern and western reaches of Indian Ocean surrounding it reflects the Jambudvip as a single interconnected geopolitical geo-economic unit with a common history. It is considered as a shared cultural space with its constituents enjoying significant economic complementarities. In past, the political division tended to be more diffuse. The current theory of international relation takes Westphalian states on the basic units and independent political entities with the sovereignty over its territory and domestic affairs. It became a norm only in mid 17th century when the more nebulous and shifting frontiers from the past began congealing into a rigid national boundaries. Invaders, migrants, and traders soon took became absorbed in these networks, enriching them and being enriched in return. Now, this closely interconnected entity is fragmented today, which with the subcontinent divided into several sovereign and independent states, India being by far its largest and more powerful entity. This being so, the country's strategic compulsions is still defined by the subcontinental concerns that overlies existing political divisions. It cannot insulate its security from the development within its neighboring countries. Now, Jawaharlal Nehru was reflecting this reality when he said that the Himalayas constituted India's security perimeter, even though some sections of the range fell within the territory of other states such as Nepal. Equally, the country influence cannot expand beyond the subcontinent without first transcending the political boundaries that divide the subcontinent. India is unable to connect with its neighborhood in the Gulf and Central Asia because historical contiguity with these geographical is interrupted by Pakistan. In the east, Bangladesh formed the political barrier to India's seamless linking with the Southeast Asian neighborhood, although this is gradually overcome with the relation has been improved. The situation is complicated by the overlapping ethnicities, kinship, linguistic ties that spill across the national boundaries on the subcontinent. People living in West Bengal and Bangladesh share common language and culture. Tribal communities like Naga, Misos resides on the both sides of the boundary separating India and Myanmar. These are the disputes over the divided use of natural resources such as rivers and forest. Since independence, the persistent challenge for India is the reconciliation of its security interest, which covers the entire subcontinent, with the reality of a divided polity. There are only two ways that an analyst can see India restoring its coherent, unified, and effective strategy for the subcontinent given its geographical, historical, and cultural reality. One is being a powerful enough to impose its security perspective on other countries in the subcontinent in the manner of Pax Indica. Other is by designing the political, economic, cultural, and security policies to create a web of interdependencies, which is nowadays following more. These approaches can help a country to work around, though not erase the existing subcontinental political boundaries. If it chooses to create a web of interdependencies, India could take the advantage of its size and asymmetrical strength vis-a-vis its neighborhood to achieve a level of interconnectedness that would render the border irrelevant. The positive experiences of dense engagement and productive cooperation would over the time create a common strategic perspective encompassing the subcontinent as a whole and reflected in a shared regional identity and the pursuit of shared political, economic, and security interest with the rest of the world. Whatever be the approach, overwhelming dominance and cooperative engagement, the enduring challenge is same. Though it has manifested in different ways during the historical phases, India's challenge is to transform the contested territories into one aligned with one more expensive and expansive and expanding global objectives. The status of being largest country in the subcontinent still resonates with the mental map that lies embedded in Indian consciousness. There is a constant effort, even if only the subconscious level, to rise above the political divisions in the subcontinent so that ancient geography became a whole again. The another unique element India's worldview that is shaped by the geography and history. India is a classic example of crossroads culture. Its peninsular character put it at strides. The major maritime routes dictated by the monsoon winds both east and west. It also lays an intersections of caravans route linking Central Asia to China to the distant nations of Mediterranean. Its traders were familiar with the site of ancient Greeks, Rome's as they were in Southeast Asia and China. When Ashoka sent Buddhist mission to the foreign countries in the 3rd century, he was doubtless reaching out those whom India has already traded even political links. In the Edict 13, Ashoka refers mission he sent to a Iona, Greek king Antiochus, Turamaya, Ptolemaeus, Antigonos, Macedonia, Magas of Cyrene, and Alikasudara, probably the Alexander. In the Southeast Asia, we can see a deep imprint of long-standing close interactions which took place with India for centuries until these links were severed by the rise of European colonialism. India's engagement with the South Asian neighborhood was extraordinary in its scope, covering political, economical, and cultural religious activities. It spanned a vast expanse of a time, resulting in a rich layering of mutual influence. The Bali Yatra in Odisha still celebrates what must have been regular sailing from India to Indonesian archipelago in past. There is a misperception in some circles that Southeast Asia got all its culture and art from India. Throughout the region, one does encounter the colors and sound of India, but the cultural asset borrowed from it, it was transformed into exquisite work of the local genius and creativity. Each site stimulated the imagination of others, each encounter triggered an efflorescence of creative innovation. For India, much of the Southeast Asian was Swarna Bhumi, the land of gold. Indian textile designs traveled to the region, and the designs and motif from the region influenced Indian designs and techniques. The Ramayana and Mahabharata became popular in Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, Indonesia. Their basic narratives often embellished with local legends and characters. One can see spectacular performance of Ramayana at the Pram- Param- Prambanan temple in Jogjakarta, where the local genius has added the flavors, colors to the unique Indo-Nations. Now it is only now that India is reconnecting with its neighborhood at once familiar yet with a proud identity of its own. India's engagement over the centuries has stretched to China, eastern seaboards, and Japan and Korea. In 8th century, it was Indian Brahmin priest Bodhisena, then serving in the kingdom of Cambodia, who was invited by the Japanese emperor for consecrations of great Buddha statue at Nara. He is credited with the writing down the rituals of ceremony and composing the sacred music. Several Buddhist kingdoms in Southeast Asia retained Brahmin priests for their courts. Bodhisena musical score is still preserved in the royal palace and music is performed once a year by royal musician. It is known as Gugaku, ancient music. And trained Indian ears can discern that it is based on the classical Carnatic Rag Mohanam, whose North Indian version is called as Bhopali. Even though the Korean celebrates an Indian princess who married her royal ancestors, the Buddhist heritage continues to generate a strong affinities for India in these countries. Our ancient and rich seaborne trade with these nations is seeing a contemporary revival, though Indo-Pacific region is most dynamic component of India's external economic relations, whether in the terms of trade, investment, or tourism. India is beginning to reconnect with Asia. The Central Asia too was once a part of India's extended neighborhood as a string of Buddhist monasteries that flourished along the caravan route over the several centuries as testimony to this. These routes traversed some of the highest mountain ranges like Western Himalayas, forbidding expanse of Karakoram range. Despite such difficult terrain, remoteness, and general inhospitality environment, the mountain zones had nurtured extraordinary rich and cultural diverse communities, constituting of veritable ethnic mosaic. the Ogier, Uzbek, Kazakh, Kyrgyz, Kazakh, Afghan, who traveled along with the caravan routes, mingled with with pilgrims, traders, and adventurers from both India and China. Now, these communities have, for centuries, inhabited the fertile valleys and oases that dot this mountain range. Ancient trades and pilgrim routes also crisscross the lengths and breadths of this immense cluster of world's highest peak. The Mirad communities who call this land their own have long coexisted with one another. Empires and powerful states may have put markers all over the region, staking their claims and demanding all alliances allegiance, but the region has throughout history of zone of shifting political tides, not amenable to the concept of boundaries or lines that the nation are still built on. India's extended Central Asian neighborhood is an ethnic jigsaw bearing overlapping footprints of the world major religion Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, and even Zoroastrianism. The great city of Bukhara derives its name from the Sanskrit word vihara. The large number of Buddhist monasteries is housed. It is also through Central Asia that the Indian mathematical treatise medicine system astronomy traveled to the Arab world and later to Europe. In addition, India still bears the imprint of Mughal emperors who came from Central Asia in 15th century CE. Like Indian mountain range, too, it's a home to a veritable cross-cultural roads that cannot be easily uprooted. At its height, the British Indian Empire inherited the historical and cultural legacy that bound India to its extended neighborhood. Delhi rules from Aden in the west to Singapore in the east on the behalf of London, sought to safeguard North India from threatening advance of Russian Empire. The Indian currency, particularly the silver rupees, was in use across the neighborhood. When I visited the ancient caravan towns of Kashgar in Chinese Xinjiang, a silversmith in the old part of the town still carried a large hoards of Indian silver rupees, which were as a medium of exchange till 1950s. Now, it is likely that India's economic securities capabilities increases, its influence will expand to a extended neighborhood of past along the remembered pathways of its old crossroads encounter. Though history India Throughout history, India was a remarkably cosmopolitan place with a diverse ethnicity and religious cultures as and its embraces of plurality is not contrived. This makes the India remarkably adaptable at the ease in the world and accepting of its diversity. Made this is the Indian diaspora's secret of success. 21st century India acceptance of globalization, though somewhat hesitant, is reassertion of historical trend. What then can be described as an Indian worldview? What is the template that influences the Indian relationship with the rest of the world? The answers can be summed up like once there is an immemorial and abiding sense of affinity drawn from the geographical cosmic in the origin but reflecting in it the physical attributes of the subcontinent. It's intrinsic to a sense of being Indian and is anchored in the geography of subcontinent. The sense of affinity is overlaid by a modern nationalism but has echoes over the mental map inherited from the past. Overcoming the fragmentation of the historical and cultural spaces is the challenge. The ideas of making subcontinent whole again is a powerful driver of Indian foreign policy behavior. 2. India location is an intersection of major caravan maritime routes in the past has afforded a central innate cosmopolitan outlooks and comfort in dealing with the diverse cultures and peoples. It embraces of pluralism is deeply rooted, among almost instinctive. This is an asset of increasing globalized world. 3. India will reach out along with the same remembered pathways traced by the history, extending to the eastern and western reach of Indian Ocean, to the Central Asian neighborhood to the north and west, and its economic security capabilities expands. In Central Asia, India still echoes in the cultural of the erstwhile states of the former Soviet Union and Afghanistan, where Indian traders and Buddhist missionary have left their imprint upon the mountains and the deserted landscape. To the west, Indian influence radiates along with the Gulf and eastern seaboard of Africa. To east, India will retrace its historical footstep to Southeast Asia and the eastern coast of China and for Japan. Beyond the subcontinent, all of India's extended neighborhood. Now, another session will be foreign policy as per the independence, after independence till Cold War. That will be our next topic.